Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in the world on the 24th of August of 2026. Today we have a lots of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first let's talk about the conflict on the territory Ukraine, where the special human shield or the special diplomatic shield operation ends. And this means that the leaders of and the delegations of different countries are leaving the capital Ukraine, the city of Kyiv, and they're going home to their states. And this situation means just one thing, that there is a high threat of a large-scale Russian ballistic missile attack on Kyiv from August 25th onwards. The military experts reported and believe that most likely during the upcoming night between the 24th and 25th of August of 2026, there will be no strike from the Russian side. But telling the truth, that the chances are still very high. The Russians will attack very soon the territory Ukraine, probably using hundreds of drones and dozens of missiles, because the Ukrainians, according to information we have, using the diplomatic shield, attacked the southern regions of Russia, dealing significant damage. As we discussed during the previous video, the Ukrainians attacked at least 3 warehouses through the southern parts of Russia, and as a result of these attacks, 3 biggest warehouses through the southern parts of Russia were wiped out by the Ukrainians. And the most important thing, that the Russians didn't retaliate immediately, because the Russians don't attack the territory Ukraine when there are representatives of the European countries or the representatives of other countries, especially diplomatic representatives or leaders of different countries. The Russians wait. The Russians wait when every single person, every single leader of the European countries leave the territory Ukraine, and then the Russians will attack. But telling the truth, there was a strike back from the Russian side. The Russians didn't attack the city of Kyiv, where the Ukrainians had a military parade. Today we received this video published by pro-Ukrainian sources, and here we can see a military parade that was held in Kyiv on the occasion of Independence Days, and for the first time in history, ground robotic complexes, unmanned boats and drones were presented in large numbers, operating both autonomously and under operator control. The Russians didn't attack the city of Kyiv. The Russians basically allowed Zelensky to have this parade, but the Russians attacked the city of Odesa. And during the previous 24 hours, lots of updates were reported. The sources said that the Russians destroyed this mall in the northern parts of the city of Odesa, and here we can see the video. Here we have the consequences of attack. A very big warehouse was wiped out by Russians as a result of a massive attack. Furthermore, lots of fire anomalies were recorded through this area. A fire anomaly was recorded through the sport infrastructure. At least several oil depots were badly damaged by Russians, and fire anomalies were recorded through the city of Bilhorod-Dnistrovskyi. So lots of damages the Russians managed to deal, and later pro-Russian sources stated that during the previous 24 hours, lots of missiles of different types were used by Russians. But once again, the Russians didn't attack the city of Kyiv. The Russians are waiting when every single leader of the European countries leave the capital Ukraine, and most likely only then the Russians will start, and as we can see, the Russians can wait. Another important thing, that the European leaders are leaving the capital of Ukraine, and they are leaving Ukraine not empty-handed. Today we received a report that lots of different countries will allocate additional funds to Ukraine. For example, the European Union will allocate 6.1 billion to Ukraine for weapons. Today we received a report that Norway also decided to allocate additional funds. According to information we have, Norway will allocate an additional 9.2 billion to Ukraine in 2027, so which means that during the 2027s, Ukraine will have a lot of weapons, and most likely the Ukrainians will be able to continue fighting with the Russians. At the same time, weapons is not everything that the Ukrainians need. The Ukrainians need a manpower. And for example, today, Keith Kellogg, the former representative of the President of the United States of America, Donald Trump, said that women should be mobilized into military as well. Former Trump Ukraine envoy Keith Kellogg, I believe women should be mobilized into the military because they fight every bit as well as men. So probably the Ukraine society began preparing itself before for these measures and this situation, which most likely will take place sooner or later, either in 2027 or in the end of the 2026. At the same time, the Russians stated that they're planning to finish the conflict on the territory of Ukraine by 2030, which means that there are still up to 3 years left before the Russians believe they are able to finish the hot phase of the conflict. Now let's return back and let's continue and let's talk about the situation on the ground. During the previous 24 hours, a lot of very important changes were recorded. And first let's talk about the Zaporizhzhia direction, because the Russians continue advancing in this area. The pro-Russian sources reported that as a result of clashes, the Russians improved their positions through the village of Dolinka. And these are the changes on the ground between the dates. This is the end of the 23rd of August of 2026, and this is already the end of the 24th of August, and as you can see, there are no more villages to the east of the river of Verkhnya Tersa, at least through its southern part. So the Russians are finishing the battle for the southern parts of the river of Verkhnya Tersa. The Russians will maintain the lines, the Russians will regroup, and from positions of the river of Verkhnya Tersa, most likely the Russians would continue offensive operation further in the southwestern direction, and the main task and the main target for the armed force of the Russian Federation will be the settlement of Omelnyk, a very important village. As you can see, there are lots of roads that go through the area. One of these roads support the city of Kyiv, Orechov. Other roads can be used by the Ukrainians to supply the cities like Yurkovka and Tavriska. So this is a very important logistic hub, and if Russians take this logistic hub under complete control, this is going to be the beginning of the end of the battle for the city of Orechov itself. As for the settlement of Orechov, today pro-Russian sources published several videos where we can see how Russians, using aviation, using bombs, were attacking temporary deployment points of the armed forces of Ukraine in this area, trying to soften defenses of the armed forces of Ukraine. As for the northern parts of the settlement, we received also lots of videos where we can see how Russians were attacking positions and temporary deployment points of the armed forces of Ukraine through the northern parts of the Orechov agglomeration, trying not to allow the Ukrainians to introduce additional forces through the city of Orechov itself. Now let's move further and let's talk about the Dobropillya direction. It seems that defenses of the armed forces of Ukraine in this area continue crumbling. During the previous 24 hours, additional changes on the ground were recorded. The Russians, according to different sources, improved their positions through the southwestern parts of the Dobropillya agglomeration. The Russians continue advancing towards the villages of Novohryhorivka and Odesa. Several days ago, we received the report that Russians finished the village of Dobropillya, but yet the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation haven't confirmed this information. Furthermore, the Russians approached the southwestern parts of the Dobropillya citadel, and the clashes for the industrial zone of the southern Dobropillya have begun. Furthermore, the sources reported today, pro-Ukrainian sources reported today, that the armed forces of Ukraine began a major counter-offensive operation in the area of the city of Dobropillya with the purpose to recapture the eastern parts of the settlement and to force the Russians to fall back from the Dobropillya citadel. Pro-Ukrainian sources and pro-Russian sources reported that the Ukrainians used lots of forces in this counter-offensive operation, and during the previous 24 hours we received something on this matter. In this video we can see vehicles with soldiers and troops of the armed forces of Ukraine that the Ukrainian military authorities were trying to introduce in the area of the city of Dobropillya, but the Russians controlled the main roads, the main lines in this area, and the Russians were attacking everything that was approaching the city of Dobropillya from the northern direction. So basically now the Russians have created another kill zone, another living road like TO 515, probably the only more or less reliable road for the armed forces of Ukraine for the logistic purposes. Every single day we receive videos from this area where we can see how Russians attack this road with aviation, with FPV drones, with artillery. In coming days we believe we will receive a video with probably dozens of vehicles destroyed by Russians. So the situation in the city of Dobropillya is a very difficult one, but once again pro-Ukrainian sources claim that the Ukrainians began a counter-offensive operation, so let's wait and see how the things are going to develop. At the same time, the Russians during the previous 24 hours have improved their position significantly through the pockets between the cities of Dobropillya and Druzhkivka. As you can see, the map has been adjusted significantly since the end of the 23rd of August of 2026, and we made these changes based on the report that was published by the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation. Today, the Russians stated that as a result of clashes, the village of Kucher Yar was taken by Russians under complete control, and that the armed forces of Ukraine were forced to fall back from this area further in the northern direction. So the battle for one of the most important villages and dense network of the fortifications around the village have been finished. The Russians, most likely in coming days, will try to cut pockets right now between the villages of Steppe and Kucher Yar and between the village of Kucher Yar and Gruska. So we're talking about these two pockets. The Russians will maintain the lines, the Russians will secure these territories, and then the battle for the next defense layer, for the next defense belt of the villages of Zolotoy Kolodets, Vesel, Gruska begins. And this is a very important belt because lots of roads go through this area. If Russia take these territories under complete control, they will improve their logistics significantly between the cities of Druzhkivka and Dobropillya, and this may lead to unpredictable consequences for the TO514 road that goes further to the north. And Russians, of course, will continue offensive and will continue advancing further in the northern direction, trying to cut these roads once again physically. And this road, if Russians control this road, will once again improve the Russian logistics, and the Russians will face no barriers to continue offensive further in the northwestern direction with the purpose to attack all these villages that go to the west of the settlement of Kramatorsk and Slaviansk, and this may lead to unpredictable consequences for defenses of this area and for the combat capabilities of the armed forces of Ukraine. Now let's talk about the Druzhkivka direction. During the previous 24 hours, we received lots of updates and changes, and these are the changes on the ground between the dates, between the 22nd and the 24th of August of 2026. The sources reported that the battle for the settlement of Novohryhorivka have begun. The Russians crossed the river of Krivoy Torets, or Kazony Torets, and entered the southern part of the settlement. There is a very powerful stronghold in this area, and the Russians understand the value of this area and the consequences that the Ukrainians will face if they lose control over the territories, because this is already the beginning of the battle for the western parts of the settlement of Druzhkivka. If Russians establish complete control over the villages of Raiska and Novohryhorivka, the Russians would continue advancing further in the northeastern direction. They would be able to attack the Donsky micro-district, which is located on the western side of the river of Kazony Torets. If Russians enter, or first sabotage and reconnaissance groups enter this micro-district from the southwest, this could lead to unpredictable consequences to the entire contingent and to defense capabilities of the armed forces of Ukraine through the entire city of Druzhkivka. Meanwhile, the Russians continue bombing the city of Druzhkivka itself using aviation and using bombs. Lots of damages. The Russians continue dealing to the facilities and positions of the armed forces of Ukraine. Furthermore, the Russians have already created another kill zone between the settlements of Druzhkivka and Kramatorsk. We are talking about N20 road. During the previous 24 hours, pro-Ukrainian sources published this video where we can see dozens of vehicles that were destroyed between the cities in attempt to bring additional reinforcements and reserves to the line of combat contact. As for the settlement of Alexeyevka-Druzhkivka, defenses through this area continue crumbling. Today, several pro-Russian sources reported that the village of Osivka was completely captured by Russians and that the southern parts of the settlement of Alexeyevka-Druzhkivka also collapsed completely, and the Russians continue advancing further in the northern and the northeastern directions, northwestern directions. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation through the northern directions. During the previous 24 hours, the most important updates we received from the northern Sumy direction. This morning, the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation, as well as the group of forces north, reported that as a result of clashes, the Russians established complete control over the settlement by the name of Novokonstantynivka. So this is a very important operation. The Russians right now are trying to create a gap, a buffer zone between the road that goes from the Russian territories towards towards the village of Khotin. We're talking about this road. And now the Russians are trying to establish a buffer zone, something like a gap, something like additional distances for the armored forces of Ukraine. And if it happens, then the Russians would be able to use these roads to attack the city of Khotin from the north, and the Russians would be able to introduce additional reinforcements and reserves. So the Russians are finishing the preparation before the final part of the settlement of Khotin. The battle for the village of Khotin started several months ago, and it seems that now we're entering the final part of the battle. Furthermore, we received lots of updates, and from the Kazachya Lopan direction, during the previous 24 hours, the Russians attacked several facilities in this area. A bridge was destroyed by the Russian attack. Most likely this video is archived, but we can see how exactly the bridge between the east and the western banks of the river of Lopan, where it was destroyed. Furthermore, the Ukrainians are trying to introduce additional reinforcements and reserves from the city of Kharkiv in the northern direction, but the Russians attack temporary deployment points and positions of the armored forces of Ukraine in this area with FPV drones, trying not to allow the Ukrainians to introduce additional forces. According to these updates, we believe that the battle for the city of Kazachya Lopan is also entering its decisive phase. We have discovered most of the updates regarding the conflict on the territory to Ukraine. During the previous 24 hours, once again, the European leaders that visited the city of Kyiv, the capital of Ukraine, creating the diplomatic shield, as well as the president of Ukraine, Zelensky, made lots of very important statements, and based on these statements, we can make a clear conclusion that Ukraine is not interested, the Western countries more precisely, is not interested in finishing the conflict right now today, are not interested in accepting Russia's demands, which means that the conflict will continue not just through the 2026, but most likely at least through the first half of 2027. And that's it for today. The Military Summary channel reminds to we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for your watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes to my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.